And the effects of climate change are having a really profound impact on the Torres Strait Islands and the people who live there. Wild weather and rising sea levels are causing island erosion and inundation, damaging sacred sites and burial grounds, and literally washing away island communities.
Yeah, it's a climate crisis, and if no action is taken soon, then scientists say people may need to leave their homelands forever. Our Queensland correspondent Douglas Smith has more, and just a warning that this story contains images of human remains.
The Torres Strait spans across 50,000 square kilometres between Australia and Papua New Guinea. The cluster of 274 islands is home to more than 7,000 people who are now living on borrowed time. What you'll see in the following video is one of the traditional owners of Masig Island, Yessie Mosby, explaining how the rising sea levels have eaten away at his land over the years.
This is where my dad was when he was young. That was me with the blue crate when I was young. And now my kids are up there in 2020. All this area here needs to be pushed.
Yessie says his island is losing more than 3 metres of land each year, which is affecting the everyday life of his people.
The effect of climate change is not only the inundation and the erosion, but it affects our livelihood, how we lived here before, disconnecting us from our ancestral remains. Some of our loved ones now have been taken by the sea, where we had to relocate them due to inundation, which brought them out and revealed their remains. When the inundation and the erosion happened, it smashed her skull and some of her other remains. So these are some of the remains here where we grabbed and we placed. As what I'm lifting up now, this is a part of a right eye socket where the inundation got her out, revealed her remains.
In May last year, Yessie and a group of 7 other Torres Strait Islanders took their case to the United Nations. They lodged a complaint with the Human Rights Committee, alleging Australia was failing in its duty to protect climate-vulnerable communities. It's been reported that the Australian government has asked for the complaint to be dismissed.
This hasn't run its full course yet. We'll sit and wait and see that happen, what happens there. But the fact that it's already generated interest, and I think has already initiated, some conversation, and that's what we want. We want to look. There are things we can do to, whether it's seawalls or, other types of infrastructure or action that we can take with a bit of support from our own government. That's going to protect us, protect our place. More importantly, I think, treat this issue with the attention it deserves.
A landmark report by the Climate Council identified the Torres Strait Islands as having the most vulnerable communities in Australia to the impacts of climate change. In detail, it warned the Australian government about how the rising sea levels was eroding the viability of coastal communities, which increased the likelihood of migration and resettlement. The report also found that flooding during high tides was becoming more common, and that building seawalls and raising houses can buy time, but in the long term, some communities may face relocation.
Globally, sea levels are rising at about 3 millimetres a year or a little bit above, whereas in the Torres Strait they seem to be rising at between 6 and 8 millimetres a year. So that's a very high rate of sea level rise.
Professor Hughes says if the Australian government doesn't do more to address this climate crisis, the consequences for the people who live there will be disastrous.
I've often reflected that we talk a lot about environmental refugees from climate change, with people in those situations having to move. And Australia is probably going to be faced with the problem that the first environmental refugees from climate change will actually be our own Torres Strait Islander citizens.
Refugees in their own country. That is the frightening reality for Yessie and his people, who are fighting to save what land they have left.
We don't want to wait for 30 years down the track when we will be just standing under one tree left 300 people standing under a tree left and screaming out to the Australian government for help. We need help now. Now is the time. Like the saying goes, knock it while it's early. Look, protect it while it's early. While you can, protect it. Look after it. Save it if you can. Because when it comes too late, it will be so late that you cannot look after it. You cannot protect it.
Action now and not later. This is the plea from Yessie and the people of the Torres Strait Islands, who are in the midst of a climate crisis. Douglas Smith, NITV.
Yeah, it's alarming to see that, you know, they're on the front line of the climate crisis.
What's it like for you? You've got family up north.
It's sad to see. It's sad to see that's your country being washed away and your voices are not being heard.
Yeah.
That's why they're going overseas to, you know, get noticed.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah.